In a world that rewards constant communication, relentless sharing, and performative transparency, we often forget one of the most powerful tools of human interaction: strategic silence. While everyone else is busy announcing their intentions, broadcasting their thoughts, and revealing their plans, the truly effective know exactly when to stay quiet and turn that silence into a weapon. Niccolò Machiavelli, the 16th century Florentine philosopher and political theorist, understood this principle better than most. Although famous for his blunt advice in The Prince, some of his most powerful lessons deal precisely with what must remain unsaid. The vulgar crowd is always taken by appearances, he wrote, recognizing that speech builds appearances, while silence preserves reality. In times of overexposure, those who master strategic silence don't just protect their positions, they achieve what talkers never can. They win while others are still busy talking about winning. Machiavelli lived in an era marked by political intrigue, where a single misplaced word could cost exile, or even a life. But even in our far less lethal modern context, excessive talking continues to create vulnerabilities that wise silence avoids. Men, in general, judge more by the eye than by the hand, Machiavelli observed. And those who grasp this realize that silence, far from absence, is pure strategy. Everyone can see, but few can truly feel. The one who talks all the time overexposes himself. He offers others countless chances to judge him, and reveals very little about what really matters to be felt or understood. Every word you utter comes with a cost silence never demands. First, speaking too much creates commitments. When you declare your intentions, you bind yourself to them. In the eyes of others, your word becomes a promise. Change your mind and you appear inconsistent. Worse, you seem fake. But if you keep quiet about your plans, you preserve something valuable: the freedom to change course without having to explain yourself or apologize. Second, speech exposes how your mind works. The more you explain, the more you reveal how you think, how you reason, and where your limits lie. All this information can and will be used against you. It can be used to predict your moves, manipulate you, or even neutralize your strategy. As Machiavelli warned, the first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men around him. Likewise, the first step to assessing someone's strategic skill is to listen to how much they reveal unnecessarily. Third, and perhaps most importantly, compulsive talking destroys your aura of authority and mystery. Machiavelli was blunt. It is much safer to be feared than loved. And fear or deep respect demands distance, and distance, in turn, demands mystery. A leader who feels the need to explain every decision, justify every move, and share every thought becomes ordinary. And ordinary will never have the same commanding power or impact as one who carries the weight of the unknown. Because the ordinary talks too much, the extraordinary knows when to be silent. Think about how this plays out in modern contexts. That colleague who feels the need to voice their opinion at every meeting, even when they don't fully understand the topic, gradually loses impact. The friend who shares every detail of their life on social media doesn't become more interesting, just more predictable. The negotiator who can't stand silence and tries to fill it with concessions unknowingly hands over an advantage. And the leader who responds to every criticism, trying to justify themselves, unintentionally raises the voice of critics, while lowering their own authority. Machiavelli would likely see our contemporary compulsion for transparency and constant communication not as a sign of authenticity, but as a serious strategic mistake, a voluntary waste of power, a giving away of valuable information without getting anything in return. The three types of strategic silence. Machiavellian silence is not simply the absence of words. It's an intentional and powerful communication strategy that takes different forms depending on the objective. Understanding these different types of silence reveals how this art works in practice. The first type is the silence of information gathering. Machiavelli wrote, "The wise man immediately does what the fool takes time to understand." And this wisdom begins with silence. While others talk and expose themselves, the true strategist observes, listens, and analyzes. Because the less you speak, the more you perceive. And the more you perceive, the more powerful you become. The fool speaks first, revealing his position, while learning nothing about others. The wise, however, remain silent. They wait, they watch, they let others rush to show what they think, what they want, where their weaknesses lie. Only then do they choose how or if they will respond. This approach creates a powerful advantage: information asymmetry. While others open up, you collect data, understand intentions, map weaknesses, and most importantly, you do all this without giving anything away. Behind the scenes of a negotiation, this translates into a silent but ruthless rule: whoever speaks first loses. In relationships, it explains why those who listen more than they talk understand far more about the people around them than those who can't stop talking. In competitions, it's why those who announce their strategies too early often deliver less than they promise, even when capable of much more. The second type of silence is the silence that builds authority. Machiavelli knew that power depends not only on force but on perception, and nothing shapes perception like well-calculated silence. He wrote, "A prince must know how to imitate both the fox and the lion. The lion cannot protect itself from traps. The fox cannot defend itself from wolves." In other words, a true strategist needs to be both cunning and fierce, and part of that cunning is knowing when speaking weakens, rather than strengthens, your image. The fox doesn't reveal what it thinks. It watches, calculates, and strikes at the right moment. Talking too much wears down authority. Choosing silence builds an air of dominance and respect that few dare to challenge. Silence that builds authority works because humans hate a vacuum of information. And when faced with that vacuum, they fill in the gaps with assumptions that most of the time favor the one who stays silent. When a leader only speaks at crucial moments, avoiding commentary on every irrelevant detail, their words automatically carry more weight. When someone chooses to respond to criticism only when truly necessary, not every time they are provoked, that person radiates confidence instead of insecurity. That's why, in any field, the most powerful people speak less but with more intention. While the nervous young executive talks too much to prove their worth, the CEO utters few words, direct, firm, decisive. The insecure justify themselves with long speeches. The confident state their position, no explanation needed. The anxious leader responds to every provocation. The confident leader only replies when there's a strategic gain to be had. Want to learn how to use strategic silence to your advantage? Sign up now. But first, get to know the third type of silence. The third type is the silence that preserves ambiguity. Since it is difficult to unite the two, it is safer to be feared than loved, when you must give up one of them. This famous advice from Machiavelli goes beyond the simple dichotomy of fear and love. It applies to any situation where maintaining multiple interpretations is more advantageous than offering a single clear answer. This ambiguous silence allows others to project their own fears, hopes, and expectations onto you. By refusing to clarify, you attract different groups, each seeing what they want, even if their views contradict one another. You preserve your freedom of action by not committing to any specific interpretation. You maintain plausible deniability because you never explicitly declared a position. It's a high-level mental game. Politicians are masters of this art. They speak vaguely on purpose, so each voter hears what they want to hear. Experienced negotiators avoid taking clear stances too early, since that would limit the possible paths to an agreement. Visionary leaders talk about the why, but leave the details of the how open, expanding space for adjustments, changes, and decision-making power. In all these cases, strategic silence is not deception. It is wisdom. It is understanding that premature clarity can sabotage complex goals. As Machiavelli bluntly said, politics has nothing to do with morality. In his view, effective strategies require flexibility, something excessive communication destroys. That's why silence is not absence of speech. It is pure psychological power. Beyond the obvious tactical advantages, Machiavellian silence exerts profound psychological effects that speech simply cannot achieve. Understanding these effects is key to grasping why silence often wins where persuasion fails. First, silence creates spaces for projection. The human mind has an automatic tendency. When faced with an information void, It fills it with its own assumptions, fears, or desires, even if none of that has been spoken. It is in this silent space that people reveal themselves. When you remain silent at crucial moments, others project their own insecurities or expectations onto your silence. While they expose themselves, you stay hidden, untouched, intact. Machiavelli understood this with precision. Men are so simple and so inclined to obey immediate needs that a deceiver will never lack victims. The brilliance of strategic silence lies in exploiting this human tendency, without even needing to lie. It's pure influence without words. That's why the most skilled interrogators don't pressure with questions. They use the power of silence. The discomfort of a pause that lasts too long pushes the person being questioned to talk, to fill the void, often revealing more than they would if directly asked. The same phenomenon happens in negotiations. The side that can endure the silence tends to come out ahead. The side that can't handle the tension and rushes to fill the gaps usually ends up giving in too much, talking too much, and revealing more than they should. Secondly, silence establishes dominance in communication dynamics. Whoever speaks first, more often, or for longer, often, whether intentionally or not, conveys a certain need for acceptance, for approval from listeners. Meanwhile, the one who speaks little carefully chooses when to speak, or only talks after hearing others, subtly assumes the role of judge, not subject. Machiavelli would immediately recognize this as the living application of his famous maxim: "It is better to be feared than loved." The one who remains silent doesn't need to be loved, but their self-control and restraint command a respect that seeking validation never achieves. This dynamic explains why job candidates who ask more questions often perform better than those who spend all their time talking about themselves. It explains why, in meetings, the silent person is often taken more seriously than the louder participants. It also explains why, in the midst of conflicts, respectful silence can be more effective than the most passionate argument. In all these cases, silence shifts the balance of power. It flips the usual pattern of seeking approval through speech. Those who keep strategic silence take control without raising their voice. Thirdly, silence creates mystery, an almost invisible aura that amplifies the perception of power. As Machiavelli clearly observed, men judge more by the eyes than by the hands, for everyone sees, but few touch. What cannot be fully seen or understood tends to appear more threatening, more impressive, more worthy of reverence than what is completely exposed. The one who reveals everything, their thoughts, intentions, insecurities, plans, becomes predictable, common, uninteresting. On the other hand, the one who reveals only what's necessary, in a calculated way, preserves a layer of mystery. And that mystery acts as a multiplier. It makes others imagine there is much more beneath the surface, and they usually imagine more than actually exists. Just look at how this shows up in leadership contexts. The leader who explains every detail of their reasoning ends up demystifying their own role. By doing so, they unconsciously invite others to see themselves as equally or even more capable than they are. Conversely, the leader who shares only the conclusions, keeping the behind-the-scenes logic silent, cultivates an aura of silent authority. This preserved mystique reinforces their position, not by force, but by the almost automatic respect that mystery evokes. Authority isn't about deception. It's about understanding a truth often overlooked. Leadership depends, in part, on others' perception of a capability beyond the ordinary. We live in an age where transparency is worshipped as an absolute virtue, and silence, suspicious. Be authentic, they say. Share your truth. Communicate openly. This well-meaning advice directly clashes with Machiavelli's strategic teachings on power and influence. The promise made was necessary in the past. The broken promise is necessary in the present, Machiavelli wrote. He recognized that holding on to past statements often weakens one's interests in the present. And that's exactly what modern culture of transparency demands. A self-imposed limitation, restricting what you can do in the future, all in the name of authenticity demanded right now. But be clear, this is not a call to lie. Machiavelli's view doesn't promote deceit, but selective disclosure. Share only what serves your goal. Hide what hinders, nothing more. Never attempt to win by force what can be won by cunning. Adapting to today's world. Never try to win by full exposure what can be achieved through strategic silence. And this transparency trap shows up in many contexts. In the professional environment, it appears as the rush to showcase unfinished work before it's ready, the impulse to voice opinions without reflection, or the naivety of revealing negotiation positions before understanding the other side's limits. In personal relationships, it shows up as rushed emotional outbursts, unnecessary confessions of past mistakes, or detailed promises about plans that are still far from being realized. Machiavelli would see these behaviors not as authenticity, but as strategic mistakes, actions that give away power without receiving anything in return. The person who is too transparent becomes predictable, easy to manipulate, ordinary, and that destroys exactly what influence requires: mystery, unpredictability, strategic advantage. This mindset challenges modern communication dogmas, which often confuse quantity with quality and exposure with authenticity. The Machiavellian communicator doesn't speak to express themselves. They speak to achieve specific objectives. They don't stay silent out of fear, but out of strategic discipline. They don't withhold out of insecurity, but to preserve their options. Practical application: the discipline of silence. How can this silence strategy be applied today? The answer is not to become completely mute or withdrawn. It's about developing the discernment to know when to speak and when not to, when to reveal and when to hold back. Because in the game of power, those who master silence say more than 1,000 words ever could. The discipline of speaking only when words are more powerful than silence. There is a subtle and powerful way to exert influence. Speak only when your words serve your purpose better than silence. And this requires discipline, a discipline few truly master. The first lesson is clear: practice information asymmetry. Before exposing your position on any important issue, make sure you understand where the others stand. Instead of rushing to state your opinions, ask questions. Listen not just to what is being said, but especially to what is being left unsaid. As Machiavelli advised, the lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. So you must be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to scare off wolves. The fox's cunning begins with gathering information while revealing as little as possible. This approach is especially valuable in negotiations, where understanding the other party's true limitations and priorities is often more effective than defending your own position. The same applies behind the scenes in corporate environments. Knowing your colleagues' motivations and concerns before taking a stand helps you avoid unnecessary conflicts and significantly increases your power to influence. The second key: cultivate strategic ambiguity. This doesn't mean being intentionally confusing, but rather preserving your flexibility by avoiding unnecessary specifics. Machiavelli warned, "A prince must be slow to believe and to act, nor should he show fear. This slowness to commit preserves your freedom of action." In leadership, this might mean clearly expressing the vision and objectives while keeping the execution details open, allowing for adaptation as needed. In personal relationships, it can mean showing commitment to shared goals while remaining open about the possible paths to reach them. In competitive situations, it means holding your strategies close while others reveal theirs. The third essential skill: develop comfort with silence as a position of power. Most people are uncomfortable with silence. They rush to fill it, often revealing more than they should or conceding unnecessarily. Training yourself to embrace these moments without rushing to speak is a formidable advantage. In negotiations, this shows up as staying silent after stating your position, resisting the urge to weaken it with anxious justifications. In conflict, it means fully listening to criticism before responding, rather than interrupting with defensiveness. In leadership, it appears as the ability to announce decisions without unnecessary explanations, trusting that the weight of the decision will speak for itself. The strategy of silence, according to Machiavelli, doesn't suggest that you should never speak. It suggests that you should speak only when doing so is more advantageous than staying silent. The true master of this approach doesn't live in total secrecy, but instead creates a strategic contrast between what is revealed and what is held back. As the vulgar crowd is always taken by appearances, Machiavelli observed, and the world is made up of nothing but the vulgar. In a world where almost everyone overshares, those who practice selective disclosure stand out. Their words carry more weight precisely because they're rare. Their positions draw more attention because they're revealed with calculation. Their influence grows because it's exercised with precision and restraint. This strategy demands a rare discipline in a culture that rewards constant talking. It demands the patience to listen before speaking, the self-control to withhold information even when sharing it would feel satisfying, and the strategic wisdom to recognize when silence carries more power than speech. These qualities don't come naturally, especially in a world that rewards constant exposure. But that's exactly why they create an advantage, because they are extraordinary. The silent power that wins without being noticed. The greatest irony of silence is this: those who master it best are the least recognized for it. We live in a world that applauds the loud, the expressive, the ones who say everything. Meanwhile, the true masters of strategic silence reach their goals quietly, without noise, without spotlight, without leaving a trace. They stay silent and win, while others are still talking about winning. Perhaps that's why Machiavelli himself, despite his massive influence on political theory and the art of strategy, remains so misunderstood. His name became a synonym for coldness and manipulation. But those who read beyond the surface find something much deeper. Machiavelli understood the human soul. He knew that true power doesn't always need brute force, nor does it always rely on deception. Sometimes, power lies in simply knowing when to stay silent and letting others reveal everything on their own. In today's world, drowning in information, saturated with opinions, addicted to constant exposure, the strategy of silence almost feels like rebellion. But in truth, it's an alternative path, powerful one, to real influence. Speak less, observe more, reveal only what's necessary, and let your results shout louder than your words. Because in the invisible war for attention and power, those who master silence don't just play the game, they win it.